Mara Voss did not celebrate her birthday. She never had. Not since she was 11 years old. Not since the night her world burned down and left nothing behind but smoke and running feet, and a silence inside her chest where her wolf used to live. She was 31 now. She lived alone in a small cottage at the edge of a forest in the Oregon hills, where the roads stopped and the trees began, and nobody asked too many questions about a woman who kept odd hours and brewed strange tea in the mornings. She worked as a forest cartographer. She mapped land boundaries for a living, measuring, recording, drawing careful lines around things that belonged to someone else. She was very good at it. She was also very good at disappearing. The cottage was neat and quiet. She had 3 plants, 2 bookshelves, and a calendar above the kitchen sink, on which she marked the full moon, 6 weeks in advance. Always in red, always with a note that said the same thing: stay in. She had a box beneath her bed that held 2 things: a glass bottle of iron root tincture that smelled like earth and copper, and a folded piece of cloth embroidered with a crest she had not looked at in years. Every morning, she swallowed 6 drops of the tincture in warm water. It tasted like rust. It kept her wolf quiet. Her wolf had been quiet for 20 years. Not gone. She was never foolish enough to believe it was gone, but contained, sealed, like a river dammed up so completely that even the sound of the water disappeared. This was not natural. She knew that. A shifter without a pack, without a shift, without the pull of the moon. It was not living. It was maintenance. It was holding a door shut every day and telling yourself the room behind it was empty. But the alternative was worse. She had been 11 years old when the curse was placed on her. She had not asked for it. She had been carried, half-conscious, still bleeding from a wound on her shoulder, to a woman who smelled of smoke and old power, and that woman had pressed 2 fingers to the center of Mara's chest and said, "You will not shift. You will not be found." It had felt like swallowing fire. The witch had been paid to hide her, to seal her wolf so completely that no alpha, no tracker, no blood reader in the world could pick up her signature. Someone had ordered her pack killed. Someone had wanted no witnesses. Mara was the only one who had survived. And she had survived by becoming invisible. She was good at that, too. She was at the trailhead on a Thursday morning when the convoy arrived. She had not expected anyone. The trail was remote, and the nearest town was 20 minutes by truck. She was rolling her survey maps into their tube, her boots already muddy, her thermos empty, and she was thinking about nothing more complicated than whether she had eggs at home. 3 vehicles, black, unmarked, moving slowly. They pulled to the side of the road and stopped. She did not look up immediately. People traveled through here sometimes. Hikers, rangers, the occasional logger. She kept rolling the maps. The door of the middle vehicle opened. She felt him before she saw him. That was the only way she could describe it later, in her own mind, in the dark of her cottage with her hands still shaking. She felt him the way you feel a change in pressure before a storm, a shift in the air, a heaviness, a sense that something large and certain had just entered the space around her. She looked up. He was tall, not in a way that announced itself, but in a way that was simply true, the way old trees are tall, without effort, without performance. He wore dark clothing and moved with the kind of ease that came from centuries of being the most powerful thing in every room. His face was sharp and still, and his eyes, even from a distance, were the color of deep water, gray-green and very calm. He was looking at her. Not at the trailhead, not at the forest, at her. She picked up her bag and turned to go. Wait. His voice was not loud. It did not need to be. She stopped walking. She did not want to stop walking. Her body stopped anyway, the way bodies do when addressed by something that occupies the top of a very old hierarchy. She turned back. "Can I help you?" He walked toward her, unhurried. 2 of the men from the convoy stayed near the vehicles. The third followed a few steps behind him, then stopped at some invisible signal. He stopped 2 feet away. "You're a cartographer," he said. It was not a question. "Yes." "Working alone?" "Yes." He looked at her for a moment, not the way people looked at strangers, assessing or dismissive, but the way someone looks at a sound they cannot quite place, thoughtful, patient. "You're a shifter," he said. Her blood went cold. I don't know what you're talking about. Her voice was steady. 20 years of practice had made it very steady. Something is muffled in you, he said. Not accusatory, simply observational, like a signal under interference. I have never felt that before. You have the wrong person. I don't think so. He reached out. Slowly, without aggression, the way you move near something that might startle, and placed 2 fingers lightly against the inside of her wrist. It was 3 seconds. 3 seconds was all it took. She felt it like a key turning in a lock she had forgotten existed, a deep, structural click somewhere behind her ribs. The tincture in her blood, the 20 years of careful suppression, the witch's seal that had held her wolf in silence since she was a child. It broke. Not violently, not all at once, but she felt the crack run through her like a fracture line through ice. She felt her wolf stir, not slowly, not gently, but with the pressure of something that had been held underwater for 2 decades and had finally, suddenly, broken the surface. Her eyes went gold. She pulled her wrist back. She stepped away from him. She looked at her own hands, which were trembling now in a way she could not stop. What did you do? She whispered. He was watching her with something that was not quite alarm and not quite calm, something between them. I didn't do anything, he said. Whatever was holding you, it was already failing. She was already walking, then running. Then she was in her truck and driving, and she did not look in the rearview mirror, and she did not stop until the cottage was around her, and the door was locked, and she was sitting on the kitchen floor, with her back against the cabinet, and her knees pulled to her chest. Her wolf was awake. After 20 years, her wolf was awake. He knocked on her door that evening. She had spent 6 hours on the kitchen floor. She had swallowed twice the normal amount of tincture and felt it burn going down and do almost nothing. She had pressed her hands flat against the cold tile and breathed and counted and tried to remember every technique the witch had taught her and found that none of them worked anymore. The seal was broken. The door she had held shut for 20 years was open. She opened the front door. He was alone. No convoy, no guards. Just him, standing in the last light of the evening with his hands loose at his sides. How did you find me? She asked. You left tire tracks, he said, and you were the only cartographer registered in this district. She stepped back. She did not invite him in. He stood in the doorway. Tell me what is happening to me, she said. Your wolf has been suppressed for a very long time, he said. Something sealed it. Blood magic, I think. And old. When a seal like that breaks, the shift will come whether you want it or not. Within 2 or 3 days, you will shift. Without a pack to ground you, without any anchor, it could damage you. She looked at the bottle of tincture on the counter. The label was worn from 20 years of handling. I have been managing this on my own, she said. You were managing a seal, he said. The seal is gone. This is different. She was quiet for a long moment. Who are you? She asked, though she already knew the answer in the way her wolf already knew the answer. In the pulling, instinctive recognition that had nothing to do with wanting. Caius Dren, he said. The Alpha King, the oldest Alpha living. The one whose authority covered every pack in the Western Territory, whose word was the closest thing the wolf world had to law. She had spent 20 years avoiding him. She said, Come in. He stayed through the night. Not in a way that crossed any line. He sat at her kitchen table, and she sat across from him, and they talked, or sometimes did not talk, and in the hours just before dawn, he helped her through the first partial shift, walking her through it with the steady, unhurried patience of someone who had guided frightened wolves for centuries. It was not graceful, it was painful and strange, and she cried once, briefly, and he did not comment on it. He simply kept his voice even, and kept his eyes on her, and told her when to breathe, and when to let go, and when to hold on. By morning, she had shifted once, and shifted back, and she was sitting on the floor of her living room, with a blanket around her shoulders, and her wolf quiet again, not suppressed, not sealed, but resting, the way a wolf rests when it has been heard. She looked at him across the room. There was a massacre, she said, 20 years ago, my pack. Something shifted in his face. "I know of it," he said carefully. "The Voss pack. 11 survivors reported. All disputed. No bodies recovered by authority trackers. There was one survivor," she said. "Me. I was 11. Someone paid a witch to seal my wolf, so I could not be identified, so I could not identify anyone." The room was very quiet. "In the years after," she said, "a pack called the Marin swore allegiance to you. They moved into territory that bordered what used to be ours." She watched his face. She saw the moment he understood. Not denial, not deflection. His expression went very still, and then very cold, and the temperature in the room seemed to drop several degrees, and she understood then, with the clarity that sometimes only comes at the end of a long, long wait, that he had not known. He had not known. "Tell me everything," he said. 3 weeks later, Mara stood in the assembly hall. It was a large stone room that smelled of old cedar and wolves and history. The Marin Alpha and his senior council stood on one side. Caius stood at the center, and Mara stood beside him, not because he had asked her to, not because she had been placed there, but because she had walked there herself, with her wolf awake, and her head up, and 20 years of silence finally, at last, finished. She gave her testimony. Every detail she had buried for 2 decades, the faces, the crest, the voices she had heard from the tree line, as a small, frightened child. She said it clearly and plainly, and without drama, because she had not survived 20 years of careful living to fall apart in front of the people who had taken everything from her. The Marin Alpha did not deny it. His silence was its own answer. Justice, she had learned, was not a clean or fast thing. It took months. It involved counsels and testimonies, and a slow, grinding process that was nothing like the swift revenge she had sometimes imagined in her cottage on cold nights. It was difficult and exhausting, and sometimes it felt like it would never end. But it was real. It was witnessed. It was undeniable. And that was something she had not had in 20 years. The K. In early spring, she stood at a trailhead in the Oregon hills and unrolled a map across the hood of her truck. She had a new job, an official one, with credentials and a title and a place in the record books. Border surveyor for the Western Territory. A role that used her skills and placed her, permanently and by name, on the map of a world she had spent 2 decades hiding from. She heard footsteps behind her. Caius stopped at her shoulder. He looked at the map. He did not say anything, which was one of the things she had come to appreciate about him. He understood that silence was not always empty. After a moment, he leaned forward slightly to read the northern boundary line she had drawn that morning. Their hands rested on the paper, side by side. Not touching, almost. Her wolf was still. Not the held, desperate stillness of suppression, but the deep, settled stillness of something that had finally, after a very long time, come home. She let him stand close. That was enough, for now. That was more than she had believed was possible. And for the first time in 20 years, Mara Voss did not feel like she was disappearing. She felt like she was here,